Excited to see Shirel on Zoom and to be able to introduce her. Shirel is an artist who is based in Tel Aviv, and she uses drawing, sculpting, video, and sound to create performances and installations. She explores cities and communities and the relations between people and space. She earned her bachelor's of fine arts from Bezalel, the famous art school in Israel, and her master's from Tel Aviv University. Exhibited in major galleries and art festivals in Israel and across the US. She's currently exhibiting a sculptural installation in Bat Yam at the Bat Yam Museum of Art. In addition to her art practice, Shirel lectures, as you're going to hear. She leads art tours, teaches art, and is an art consultant to a variety of private groups and institutions. She draws from multiple fields of knowledge, and using all of that experience and education, Shirel weaves into her each experience aspects of social issues, politics, economy, religion, and more to create a vivid and nuanced image of the Israeli reality. Her knowledge and passion and love of all that is art in Tel Aviv and Israeli history are extremely contagious. Yay, Shirel! You guys are in for a treat.
Thanks, Joanna. I'll just say the sculptural installation was in 2019. Since then, I had an exhibition in the City Gallery in Durham, North Carolina, and a residency a month ago in the Contemporary Art Center in Arad in south of Israel. So a lot has happened since. And today, I'm gonna take you on a crazy ride looking at Israeli artists of the 21st century. And I'll start by sharing the screen, but also, one moment. Here we go, here we go. So for a moment before I dive into what we're looking at, I want to say something about even creating such a list, right? Because this is like, how do we choose them? And there's a context to everything. And the moment we narrow down to a list of people, what are the criteria? And I think it's important to say, because, you know, how do I choose? Who do we mark as the most important, as the ones to watch? And just to give an idea of different possibilities, in 2018, there was an article by curator Talia Ushalmi exploring the Israeli art scene through 8 different families and family lineages. That, for instance, is one option. And just to look at another option, this is an exhibition from 2015 in Rohat Gallery by Shai Shapira Kaltel, which basically took on a kind of artistic visual interpretation of all the financial hidden parts of who's driving the art world. So you can see here, this is a painting, but it's actually a diagram of all the donors and influential people behind the Tel Aviv Museum of Art and how they influenced the prizes. This one was changing all the names of the donors. And if you look here, these are 7 paintings of the major Israeli collectors that he created on that wall. Obviously, the collectors ended up buying their paintings, but this exhibition created quite a stir because of this idea of exposing who's behind the scenes. So what are my criterias? And I think that's important. Like, how did I even approach this crazy request by Ari to create this session? So I started the marker from 2005 until today, looking for artists that are world-renowned, that have an impact both abroad, but also on Israeli art itself, and or allow a window to shifts or major transitions within the Israeli art world. So those were my criteria. I also tried to choose people I enjoy talking about. And it means that not everyone is in this list, right? Some people are out, but hopefully it is going to give you quite a wide understanding of what's going on in the last 15 years, and then kind of bringing us to today with quite an understanding of what the scene looks like right now. I'll also say any one of these artists, we could have a full hour about them. So instead, we're zooming, double meaning intended, we're zooming through each of these artists, showing one or maximum two works of theirs. So it's a very different type of encountering art. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll be like, just, I want more. Okay. Ari knows that usually, I mean, the sessions are usually 1 hour long. This one is extra crazy, and it's the first time ever I'm doing it. So I'm gonna talk for between 50 minutes and an hour. I'm gonna try and like smush it all into that and then open for questions. So I'm aiming for 1 hour 15. If it goes shorter, that's cool. I will not go longer. And thank you for joining me on this ride, because it's really exciting to do something for the first time. And I've been spending a month on this lecture and kind of also debating with a lot of artists and curators that are friends, and we've been arguing back and forth on who needs to get into this list and who not. So there are a lot of people that were part of this conversation with me. Okay. So we're starting with Sigalit Landau, and I put for each of you with the artists kind of this information because these things kind of matter. And I chose her work, her very seminal, huge, ambitious installation from 2005 at the Helena Rubinstein Pavilion, which belongs to the Tel Aviv Museum. We're seeing here the image. The exhibition actually started from outside the museum, and it was, I'd say it was the first, like it was the largest scale we've seen in Israel. Like she marked a huge difference. It was also the amount of people that came to that exhibition was extraordinary. And she was like, it was an event. It was an event written about and everything. This is already after, like in 2002, she already had quite a large exhibition and a success, right? You can see here, she finished her BFA in 1995 and was represented even then by Alon Segev. So we're gonna see a few images from inside the exhibition. The pavilion is a 3-floor huge space. She took over all of it. You can see just the sheer scale. This is kind of a fallen head of a ram. You're seeing it from two different sides made of bronze. And what you're seeing here, these are actually the pillars holding the ceiling, okay? And this image you're seeing is real size, okay? This is human size. So it gives you an understanding of the scale of what you're seeing. You can see here another angle from the exhibition. So you see the ceiling, the video we'll see a minute of in a moment. These figures are real human size. And this whole exhibition, the name of the exhibition was The Endless Solution. The Endless Solution alluding to the final solution, the Holocaust, the Nazi kind of plan to exterminate the Jewish people. So it was alluding to that, mixing history, catastrophe, dystopian with future, and leaning a lot on the Dead Sea, as we'll see in a moment. A way to understand how she brings these things in. And again, this is real size, okay? The car isn't a miniature, it's a real size car, real size human. So walking throughout the exhibition, you feel as if you're discovering a world. These shoe boxes were all marked with numbers from 42 to 45, which are actually the years in Nazi Germany when the extermination started. So the Holocaust was extremely present. The whole feel of a world that is like both from the past and from the future, dystopian world, that was kind of what was the feel there. And I want us for a moment to see an excerpt of this video, which some of you might have seen, filmed in the Dead Sea, which Sigalit Landau has been working in the Dead Sea and with the salt of the Dead Sea for the last 15 years. So these watermelons are tied with a metal spiral, filmed from above. And watermelons, there's a chemical reaction when they're in the salt water. The liquid is sucked out of them, and they become extra sweet. I'm sorry about this. It's the only video that I couldn't embed, so I'm gonna keep this for the end, and we're gonna move on. This exhibition, one moment. This exhibition really marked a transition in the scale of works. Another also opening of a work that includes a whole story and both sculpting and video. We're moving on to Guy Benel. You can see he studied, there are two major art schools in Israel, Bezalel Academy of Art and Design and the Midrasha School. And those two art schools are kind of constantly in competition of who's putting out the best, most famous artists. So you'll see those two names coming up. So BFA ended in '97. His MFA did in Columbia University, ending in 2003. This is the gallery that represents him, and you can see here his current living. He's a video artist, internationally acclaimed. I'll just say about Sigalit Landau, she exhibited in the MoMA in New York. She represented Israel in the Venice Biennial, so we're talking that scale. Guy Benel too, this video specifically, and we're viewing a private copy because the owner of this video are the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And we're gonna see just the beginning of this video.
Honey, I'm home. Honey? Honey?
So what we're seeing here, Stealing Beauty, is actually a video that was filmed in IKEA shops around the world, filming a full sitcom by Guy Benel and his family, wife and kids. That's his wife, actually his ex-wife. He's now divorced and remarried, and his two kids. It was fully filmed with no permission in all these IKEA places. That's why they also had to move every time someone from the store was like, what are you doing? You need to get out, because they were basically doing everything, like getting undressed and everything with customers going around. And Guy Benel, his style, and you'll also notice if you heard, he doesn't put on an accent, it's Israeli accent. He creates these home videos that kind of bring together with a lot of humor, right? This isn't an IKEA store. He's half undressed, yeah? Bringing together with a lot of humor, a family, like a family portrait, how it meets consumer culture between public and private space, and constantly playing with our culture and what it is to be, in many of his works, a father. You can imagine like how, and you can see, can you see the price tickets everywhere, right? So it's all with the price tickets, nothing here is permitted. That's Guy Benel. Okay. Next, we're moving on to Adi Ness. Oh, I misspelled here, Bezalel, sorry about that. Born in '66, graduated in '92, a little earlier, and you can see this work is from 1999, but I'll explain in a moment why he's in this series. This work specifically, a photograph, Adi Ness, all his photographs are fully staged, days and days of staging. You can see these are Israeli soldiers from his series soldiers, but it looks like the Last Supper. And this this photograph broke the record of all times in 2007 when it was sold for the second time for $264,000. And he broke the record of an Israeli living artist at that time. Some of you might know his series from the mid-2000s, which really put his name like as a household name, his biblical series, staging scenes in the contemporary world while kind of alluding to biblical stories. You can see in this case, David and Jonathan, in this case, Cain and Abel. And again, all of these are fully staged very, very, very carefully. There is nothing here that like isn't the lighting, the actors, the makeup, the clothing. So his works are very, very curated. And another one from this series, Ruth and Naomi. So really kind of creating these visual interpretations of the biblical stories. We're moving forward to Yael Bartana. You can see, oh my God, I apologize now for all the slides with Bezalel misspelled. And I won't do it from now on. So you can see here her BFA and then MFA. And Yael Bartana is a very fascinating also precedent because not only she's an Israeli world-acclaimed artist, actually in the Venice Biennial, the same year Sigalit Landau represented Israel in the Israeli pavilion, Yael Bartana represented Poland, which hasn't been heard of. An Israeli artist being a representative of Poland in the Venice Biennial with her trilogy And Europe Will Be Stunned. You can see here two still images from the movie Wall and Tower in the series. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna see an excerpt from the Nightmares movie of the trilogy. Don't worry about the name, it's not too scary. So we're gonna see a little and then I'll explain what we're seeing.
Żydzi, rodacy, ludzie, ludzie! Myślicie, że ta stara kobieta, która wciąż śpi pod pierzyną rybki, nie chce was widzieć? Zapomniała o was? Mylicie się. Ona śni o was każdej nocy. Śni i drży ze strachu.
So obviously he's an actor and you can hear him speaking in Polish in this very like this speech-like voice in an empty stadium. We'll see in a moment what happens in this stadium. But basically it's a call for the 3 million Polish Jews of Poland to come back to Poland, to recreate or revive the Jewish-Polish bond and connection and culture in Poland. And Yael Bartana in this trilogy did a few things. First of all, really kind of touching on the question of where do Jews belong? Where are they in the world? Like, how are we addressing these days our past culture? Another thing that she brought into the Israeli art world in quite an extreme way are two things. One is the cinematic side of the fine arts world. So really creating cinema within the art world. I just want you to see a little more what they're doing. So creating cinematic video art. The other thing is really creating storylines. The video art tended to be very abstract, less story-like, and Yael Bartana shifted that. Her videos could almost be, they do have a storyline. They could almost be in a cinema rather than in in a gallery space. Okay, so this is Yael Bartana. Let me just see if we can see this a little more. Okay, so moving on to Gal Weinstein. We're seeing here an earlier work from what I'm going to show you. Gal Weinstein was born in the north of Israel in Kibbutz Nahalal, and his works are very much influenced by that combination of growing up in the north and in more of an agricultural space while living in Tel Aviv and working as an artist. What you're seeing here is a full, huge space, gallery in the Herzliya Museum. And what this is like an aerial view of the Jezreel Valley in the north of Israel, but it's made of synthetic carpets, okay, and felt. So it's like this huge puzzle. Visitors could walk on it. And that's the whole piece. And it's kind of playing with that combination between the nature, right? The look of nature, the beauty of nature, but the way it's created are all industrial materials, very cheap materials, nothing natural in it. And it creates this, this tension between the two. Gal Weinstein represented Israel in the 2017 in the Venice Biennial in 2017, and we're seeing the installation was called "Sun Stands Still," which is a quote of half a sentence from the book of Joshua in the Bible: "Sun stands still, and the moon in the valley of Ayalon." When the weather was frozen on that day for the battle to be able to continue, and that was the name. And we're seeing here, it almost looks empty, right? It's like, but what are we seeing? Ornamented, almost dirty wool, like what's going on? You can see here when we take a look a little further back, and what we're seeing here is not a photograph. It's a work on the wool, which is actually steel wool on felt. And I'm going to show you, just so you understand what we're seeing. This is felt, and he works with steel wool. This texture is created with coffee and sugar that create mold with time. Okay, so he uses these crazy materials that make you want to touch everything to create these landscapes or ornaments. So what you're seeing here, it's felt, and steel wool and oxidized steel wool on wool. And here you can see this is a whole room. You can see it's called Jezreel Valley by night. So the dividers are made with polyurethane. So he has the dividers, but what you're seeing here is all made with black coffee and sugar that has molded. And it starts basically with the fact that any Israeli artist in the studio, we usually have just black or Turkish coffee. It's the easiest one to make in the studio. And also we don't need milk for that, which is good because not always there's a fridge. And then artists like artists are, we don't always wash the dishes in the studio. Mold starts building up on it, and he slowly discovered the beauty of this and started creating work with this mold. And if you imagine an aerial view by night, so you can understand how this kind of becomes that, and again, the play between material and the visual. Moving forward, hope all of you are okay here. With Ilita Zulay, and you can see already the graduation years are a little further on, a photographer. What we're seeing here is the installation view from her exhibition in the Israel Museum, No Things Die. That was a culmination of a 3-year process of going through and documenting and investigating and researching the archive of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Now, to understand some of the logic of how she works, this is from a different project of hers that are objects that she found during researching buildings in Tel Aviv from the 1950s, where in most of them there were walls that were made out of scraps and stuff because it was cheaper, but they were also badly affected, and those were up for demolition much earlier, and she would go there and kind of pull objects out of the wall and started documenting them. Now, when looking at this, it seems like we're looking at a wall installation with someone looking at the keys here, right? That's probably what most of us are thinking that we're seeing here. But actually, if you look at the installation of this exhibition, this was what we were looking at. And this man wasn't looking at the photo, he is part of it. Her photos are never like, they're reconstructed, okay? They're comprised of many, many photos that she brings together into one almost fantastic world. And you can see this in her work, the one we saw in the installation. Each of these are a separate work. I wanted you for a moment to see them because she creates these collages, and each of these works are almost like a puzzle piece. Now one moment, I wanna show you something which I usually don't do, but so you can see this. Can you see I'm moving it? And can you see here there's a hole and that you're seeing the other works? Did you see that? Okay, it's because this photograph object is framed in this unique way where this is actually empty, okay? So I just wanted you to see that. So each of these become an object of its own, and each of them tell a very complex story using different pieces of the archive. So the frame itself becomes part of the work. You can see here the names, right? And you can see it's not only photography, because it's photography with gold leaves. So part of the photographs, she works with them, on them also handcraft. Here is another example. And it also becomes, it's kind of crazy to see them also in real life, because it becomes very, very confusing of it's funny, what's real and what's not real. It's like how, and usually with photography, it's supposed to document the real, right? And parts of it are, but parts of it are totally constructed and mixing together the archive, the storage places, the artifacts, all of them together. Ilit Azoulay also in terms of the, I'd say of the Israeli art world, really marks a trend of art that stems from research and projects that can take 3, 4, 5 years to arrive at because of the depth of the research that goes into them. We're moving on to Africani, and you can see here again, BFA Midrasha, MFA Hunter, it's Hunter College in New York. She's living in Brooklyn, NYC. Africani is a video installation artist and a performance artist. These days, she's more, I'd say most of her work are performative works. This work specifically was done both in Hartman Contemporary Art Museum in Brazil and in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And as I mentioned before, when it comes to the criteria of who made it into the list, even though hasn't been living in Israel for quite a long time now, she's still very much involved and exhibits here, and her work does have, I'd say, major impact. So this work I chose to bring for you some of the images from the Inhotim Museum in Brazil. It's the largest contemporary art museum in Brazil, as well as the largest like outdoor gardens, public sculptures museum. And what Afri does, this is her, if you were wondering, she works for quite a while with the museum staff, learning about their lives and working with them to create guided tours that are specific to their personal stories. In this case, she worked not with the educational staff of the museum, but with the maintenance and gardeners of the museum. It's a long process where most of her energy goes into working with them and building the work together with them. It's between a month and 2 months. And then what happens, her work of art is actually the tours that they lead for visitors of the museum. So each of these people have their own tour that is based on their field of knowledge, their personal stories, and is matched together with her to specific exhibition artifacts, and they lead tours. So you're seeing here, and for the duration of her performance, basically the maintenance and gardening staff completely become the leaders and receive the spotlights. Her exhibitions or her performances constantly bring into question the system of art viewing, and she very often refers to it that museums are her raw material, the material she works with. I'll just also say that she's, other than her works in the largest museums in the world, she's also on regular staff at SVU in New York, and also created there a program of City as Site, which she leads and has been running for the last few years. Zoya Cherkasky. So you can see here, she was born in Kiev. She came to Israel, immigrated Omeid Aliyah to Israel in the mid-90s with a large wave of immigration from the former Soviet Union. And we're seeing here a work from her very early days when she just finished, kind of just after finishing her studies. It was part of an exhibition called Judaica that was exhibited in the Rosenfeld Gallery. And what you can see she did here, she basically took the symbol that, it's the Nazi symbol coerced on the Jewish people as a sign of shame, right? But what she did, she took that and transformed it into 18-karat gold brooches, jewelry, to be proud to wear of. So extremely provocative, and also interesting because it's provocative, but it's tiny. It's literally jewelry and it's a pin. Those were exhibited and created quite a stir. And she continued in her career. Actually, she's a painter. At this point, the best-selling Israeli painter in the world, with her exhibition, her debut exhibition in New York last year was sold out with an amazing review in the New York Times by Barbara Smith. We're seeing here a diptych that can kind of give you an idea of how provocative she is. You can see her school mobbing. This is like in Russia with the Jewish kid holding his violin, being the geek, being bullied in school, right? And then here in Israel, the same kid is suddenly bullied by Israeli kids. These works created, I mean, there is nothing politically correct about these works or about anything she does. She's in your face in a very extreme way, creates socio-political conversations with every painting. And she became very much also the voice of this immigration that was almost unspoken, of these teenagers that arrived in Israel when they were between 10 years old and 15, 16, 17 years old, transitioned into a completely different culture and didn't always have the voice to speak about it. And she became the voice of this generation. So much so, we're seeing here a work, or the opening work from her exhibition, her solo exhibition in the Israel Museum that was in 2018. This work is from 2016, but the exhibition was in 2018. The name of the exhibition was Pravda, which in Russian means truth. And it was a very provocative exhibition fully about this former Soviet Union immigration to Israel. It had the highest number of visitors to the Israel Museum ever. And Zoya also did all the voice, like explaining about the paintings in Hebrew, English, and Russian. So if you walked around the exhibition and listened, you were actually hearing the artist explain. Specifically, this work also quite large. You can see the size. New victims. You can see it's new immigrants coming, getting off the El Al plane, coming first time to Israel. And new victims was what her grandmother used to say when they watched TV and saw images of more people coming to Israel from the former Soviet Union. Her grandmother used to call them new victims. Okay, so that's kind of using her. Another thing I want to say about Zoya and her place within the Israeli art world, she's first of all, she can be considered as the one that opened the door to the clear voice and stories of Israeli minorities. And we'll see how that opens up. Another thing, if you look carefully, you can see here at the bottom of the painting, you can see her signature, the date, and the name of the painting. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but in contemporary art, the signatures migrated to be at the back of the painting. For instance, if you think of Matisse or Picasso, we know their signature. Why? Because it was part of the painting. But if you start looking at contemporary art, or even it started in modern and postmodern art, the signatures migrated behind. And in this way, Zoya she not only introduced realistic painting back into the scene, but also going against the grain, putting her signature in the front and the name of the painting. It's a very, I'd say, a badass move. And it's kind of in terms of the art world and what's appropriate or not. So she doesn't do anything, I'd say, appropriate. Lost by her is actually from now. She did a piece for the New York Times before Passover. It was in the New York Times, drawings from this period. You can see an open air minyan just with the 2-meter distances because of COVID. These are small drawings that she kind of took the life of the shtetl together with the COVID and kind of how it all mixed up. Okay, we're moving forward. I'm just looking at the time. Okay, we're okay here. I hope you are too. Naamat Sabar, you can see the date of birth is moving forward, 1982. BFA from the Midrasha, MFA from Columbia, living in NYC. What we're seeing here is actually a performance held, exhibition and performance held in CCA, Contemporary Art Center in Tel Aviv. Naamat Sabar, before studying for her BFA, was a musician, which we'll see in a moment comes to play in all of her works. So if you came into the gallery outside of the performance time, this is what you would see, these broken guitars and strings spread all over the floor, and the visitors could play them. So kids were having a lot of fun. I was too. And the performance night had her and a few other performers creating music with this work. What we're gonna see are a few seconds from a much longer video of a work of hers, actually in LA. Okay. So this is her. What I'm going to do, we're going to listen to the music it creates soon, but I want to explain to you what we're seeing. We're seeing works on a wall, right, that are also very aesthetically pleasing. They're made from industrial felt and guitar strings and are connected to a speaker. And thus they're also completely shifting what felt is usually used for, which is to absorb sound and create silence. And she creates these beautiful sculptural 2D, 3D works that actually also become new musical instruments that are moved totally by the body. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna skip all the way here so that you can hear what it sounds like. And you can see the way she's playing it is also by using her hand on the felt or on the string. these amazing works, which are visually pleasing, new invented musical instruments, and combining these different fields, and also definitely having, other than exhibiting all over the US and the world, having quite an impact also here on the combination between the different fields of fine arts and music. Okay, now we're transitioning here in a way. All the artists I showed you until now are world renowned, okay, in major art collections around the world. The few artists I'm going to show you now, they're extremely famous in Israel, very important to what's happening here, and making their way in the international scene. We're starting with Zoya Cherkasky, and we're looking at the installation view from the Tel Aviv Museum of Art in 2015. He was the winner of the Rappaport Prize for Young Artists. It's the equivalent of the Turner Prize in London or the Hugo Boss Prize in New York. So it's the major Israeli art prize. And in a way, his paintings are, I'd say, extremely Israeli. The messiness, the simplicity, the going against the form or the structure of painting. In a way, when I look at his paintings, I think of the internet. Everything is on the same surface, on the same field. There's no hierarchy to the paintings, and there's also a lot of humor. If you can see here, things on carpet and 3 legs. I don't know if you can find the legs, but look, there's a foot and leg here, a foot and leg here, and a foot and leg here. You have the vase or the card that appears in many of his works. When you look at his titles, it's like if you read the title, you then find yourself most likely looking at the paintings as if they're a kind of puzzle or riddle. And he touches a lot on Jewish themes of the wandering Jew, the palm tree, the vase, all these issues that come up, but his works kind of act or play almost like a riddle. Yeah, I think we'll leave him at that. We're moving forward to Nissim. And if you remember, I said about Zoya Cherkasky, who opened the window to, or the door for talking about identity. Nissim is probably the woman. These works are in the permanent collection of the Israeli art in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art, as well as in collections all over the country. She just won a major prize for women in art. And because of the revolutionary work she did, she's also already part of the studying curriculum in high schools and in colleges, because she was basically the first artist that brought to the front the connection between being a Mizrahi Jew, a Jew descendant from Arab Muslim countries rather than white European countries, and the combination between that and the socioeconomic status. We're gonna see a few moments from the video, and then I'll silence it so you can, so I can explain what we're seeing. This is Vered.
מאוד טובים שהתייחסו אליי והתנהגו אליי טוב. זכיתי בעבודה טובה וגם אנשים טובים. וזהו. העיראקים של פעם אצלהם לא כמו בארץ.
So what we're seeing, this is her mother. And her mother worked all her life as a cleaner to provide Vered with the means for a better education and to go to study in art school. The name of this work is, If I Tell You the Story of My Life, Tears Will Roll Down from My Eyes. This generation, specifically her parents are from Iraq, suffered a lot, did everything they could to provide their children, the next generation, with opportunities they didn't have, and didn't really talk about it. And you can see her here cleaning outside in South Tel Aviv, the sun made of cleaning gloves. Her dress is actually made with what we use here to mop the floor. In a way, very, oops, sorry about that. In a way, it's almost, you can say degrading, but Vered works with, her parents appear in most of her works. And actually there were a few interviews with them of how they feel that they're, through her works, able to tell the story of their community and their generation. So that's Vered Nissim. We're moving here to Niri Takele. You can see her, born 1985 in Ethiopia, arrived in Israel in 1991, studied in Shenkar College and living in Tel Aviv. She was like queen of her year when she graduated, and then she participated in Fresh Paint art fair in 2018. Her work was declared like the Hammer Prize and was sold in Sotheby's. And she's at this point a meteor. Like if you want to buy paintings of her, you need to wait because basically everything is sold. This is one of her early, quite famous works. The stork in Ethiopian culture, Ethiopian Jewish culture, is the symbol of returning to Jerusalem. In a similar way, if you think of the pigeon in the story of Noah in the Bible that symbolizes that the water is down and one can come, in many Ethiopian Jewish hymns, the stork is the bird that comes to say to the Jews of Ethiopia, it's time to come to Israel. You can see here what's in the painting, basically the stork is dead. It's held dead in the hands and kind of touching in a very poetic and painful way on the difficult or almost brutal transition of Ethiopian Jews to Israel and the discrimination they've been experiencing here. These are works you can see here from 2017 and from 2020. She's amazing with colors, like it's stunning. I must say this size doesn't do her justice because seeing her works in full size, it's just like complete pleasure. I once stood in front of one of her paintings with a group and someone told me, an Israeli group, that, and someone said, but Ethiopians don't look like that. And because they're gentle and they're small and they're this. And it was funny because actually one of the things that Nirit mentioned in her interviews was she paints her community the way she sees them: powerful, larger than life, exciting. And we can see here again the way one painter can become a voice for a community. Okay, and now we're moving. Okay, yeah, and we're even okay with times. We're moving to kind of what's happening now, and I'm going to share with you the 3 artists that won the major prizes of 2020. Okay, so the first one, remember I mentioned the Rappaport prize that Zoya Cherkasky won. So that prize for 2020 was picked by Hila Tuni Navok. She's a sculptor, and you can see her here. I chose to bring this work of hers, which really was Kabli. This was exhibited in Kibbutz Kabli, which is far north in Israel, like really far north. And actually, I think the amount of people that drove out there to see her work was kind of stunning. These are metal sculptures by Yechiel Shemi from the 1980s, a very prominent modernist Israeli sculptor. And she created these extensions with these very contemporary, cheap plastic materials, which basically turn as very harsh sculptures into a place where you can chill and sit and that feel actually human. She plays a lot with primary color, a lot of humor, a lot of relationship between the modernist thought of sculpting and the contemporary materials that we use and have. Very innovative, very playful, and taking things you can see even here to a human scale. So that's Hila Tuni Navok. Since she won the prize just now, she'll be exhibiting her solo exhibition in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art in 2021. The next winner we have is Efrat Hakimi, currently residing in Chicago. Efrat won the Presser prize for photography. Just so you have an idea, remember Ilit Azoulay I mentioned with the huge museum installation? She's one of the previous winners of this prize. So she won it just now, 2020. You might be asking yourself, photography, but we're seeing here a paper installation. So how does that work together? So Efrat is quite a multidisciplinary artist, and she started away with paper works, a lot of humor in them. And her latest exhibition was in the Yarkon 19 gallery in Tel Aviv. Earlier, it was January 2020 when the world still seemed normal. And you can see here this work, it was a whole research around Zion Park and another village in the US that's also called Zion, tying together the myth of Zion through different locations in the world. You can see here her work, it's actually into drywall. I don't know if you noticed, but before she started as an artist, she was an engineer. So it's kind of interesting to see how that plays into her work. And you can see here one of the many photographs that were part of that exhibition, also kind of following the artifacts that were part of the Zion Park, the Zion National Park, and kind of documenting the appropriation of Native American culture into American culture, but constantly alluding through this name of Zion to things that are happening in Israel. So, and you can see here the influence, I'd say, of Ilit Azoulay and the archival approach to photography. The last artist, prize artist for this year is Karam Nathu. I'll just mention, when you see his profile picture, it's not because there's a problem with his eye, that's like his persona. You can also see the youngest of them all. And he just won the Kifel Prize of 2020. It's a prize based on a fund from Anselm Kifel. And again, the previous winner of that prize, Sigalit Landau, Guy Benel. So these prizes really mark a future for the artist. You're seeing here a work, one of his digital drawings. He plays a lot, very provocative in terms of the symbols. You can see here, these are different sculptures from kind of the modernists. If some of you are recognizing Duchamp's 1917 fountain, and this is another work here by Duchamp. You can see here the tips for artists who want to sell, and you can see here the title. So a lot of playfulness with this. And I also want to use him to say a couple of things about this list, because I don't know if you noticed, but everyone I mentioned are Israeli, but they're also Jewish. So where all the other 20% of the Israeli population, Arab, Palestinian, Druze, and so on. There are a few reasons they're missing here. First of all, in terms of proportion and how much they're exhibited as part of the canon, Karam Nathu, who is Israeli, Palestinian, Muslim, secular, yes, he uses all of those, is kind of, I'd say, the marker in a way for a new dealing with this identity within the Israeli art world. And the major reason I didn't put them as part of the list is not only because of that status, because right now, for instance, Raida Adon, who's a Palestinian Israeli artist, has a solo exhibition in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Actually, it's the first solo exhibition for Palestinian artists in that museum since it was opened. Anissa Eshkar is a world-renowned Israeli-Palestinian artist. Farid, wow, I messed up the name, so I'll just let that be for a moment. But to talk, or I'd say that to talk about Palestinian, Israeli artists within the context of Israeli art requires way more than our time frame here. And so, and also in terms of like who are the major, I'd say that Karam in that way, and at this point with the prize, is marking a new level of that. These are stills from his most famous video, Repeat After Me, in which you can see this is in his family home. These are his family members. It's a very, I'd say, complex video with a lot of humor and looking at the identity, his personal identity, his familial identity, and the question of language with all of this. Okay, and just before we end, I can't believe I'm on time. I'm very proud of myself. I wanted to end with an artist who is currently exhibiting, and I would say is the next best thing. Like if I had to bet on who's next to come on this list, it's probably him. I'll just, full disclaimer, he's a very close friend, but he wouldn't be on this list if he wasn't an amazing sculptor. His work is currently exhibited in the Artist Residence Gallery in Herzliya. You can see here the materials he works with. This is metal and brass, and there's water inside. The scale is huge. They have this beautiful silence, and you're seeing here an exhibition view of part of the exhibition, and you can see the work with different kinds of metals. Some of them come from the agricultural world, and then kind of combined together with brass and copper that actually come from the world of jewelry, and a lot of them have this kinetic movement to them. Okay, so, oh my God, I am like on the minute. So we had this crazy ride, and hopefully now you actually see these faces and kind of know a little of who they are. We spoke of Sigalit Landau, Guy Bener, Adines, Gal Weinstein, Yael Bartana, Ofri Knani, Lita Zulay, Naamat Sabar, Zoya Cherkasky, Shai Chezkeli, Vered Nissim, Nirit Takele, Hilat Unin Avok, Efrat Hakimi, Karam Nathu, and Moshe Roas. The last thing I want to do, because we didn't see the video, is just to do this. One moment. So that you do get at least an image. One moment. Of the, you know what, I'll do this because it's going to be easier in Hebrew for me. I just want you to have the image. In the meantime, you can see, you can ask questions in the chat. In the meantime, here. So I just wanted you to see this, the video we started seeing. This is the image, a spiral of watermelons that opens. This is her in the Dead Sea. This is real scale, the watermelons, all of this. So a very, very ambitious video, part of the permanent exhibition, the Israeli exhibition in the Jerusalem Museum, and exhibited all across the world. A very powerful image with watermelon traditionally in the Israeli art world, symbolizing kind of being part of the land. And you can see how the fact that she opens some of them kind of gives this feeling of wounded guts within this work. So we're back to here, but I think what I'll do is I'll stop sharing so I can see all of you and look at the chat and
well,
see.
Let me start with some questions, and we'll get to the chat as well in the questions. Can we do it that way? And then you can look in the chat as well. Is that okay?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So I was reading the chat and just general questions. Number one, so if Ada Gilbert, who likes to collect art, wants to collect art, where do you go to buy art in Israel? You know,
perfect.
Where does Ada go?
I'm so happy you asked that. So a few things. First of all, actually right now there's an art sale called Bread and Roses that is has hundreds of Israeli artists participating, and all money that comes in from those art sales, 25% go to the artists, and all the rest go to this organization that helps support women creating independent businesses, specifically in the Arab and Palestinian and Bedouin communities. So that's happening right now. I'm also participating there, and all the artists that you saw in this lecture are also participating. So that's kind of a good place to go. then I'd say the easiest way is to find someone like me to walk you through the ropes. It kind of, it's a labyrinth, and you each have your personal taste, and to find what you love and how to negotiate is difficult. So there's me or people like me that do that. It's a pretty like set kind of scene of how it works. But yeah, that's the easiest. Another way is to go into the galleries and see who are the artists that are part of those galleries. But usually I would recommend having someone help you through that labyrinth, navigating your taste, your style, the sizes, your budget, all of that, and narrowing it down. Because I don't know if you noticed, we just touched on 16 artists, and it's like this rich world that can be hard to navigate.
What's the average cost of an art piece from the people that you've showed us?
That from the people I showed. So Sigalit Landau is like tens of thousands of dollars, right?
It's no problem for Ada. What about more affordable?
And then the younger artists, it would be like, I'd say it's starting like the youngest artist, but they're all at this point like well known. So it would be around the $10,000. They're obviously, look, the problem with such a list is that, you know, there are like dozens and hundreds of more amazing artists. You don't always have to go. And sometimes you want someone else that might be like your style and isn't necessarily that famous. So yeah, but the artists I showed, they're already at that stage. And Bread and Roses, it is online, and I can send Ari the link to everything, and he can pass it on to you. Another gallery which is now holding a sale is Maya Gallery, which is a young co-op gallery in Tel Aviv. They're also holding a sale to sustain the continuing work of their gallery. Also, all the artists donated their work. So we also have a lot of those, and they can be quite good.
Let's go back a step and talk about Bezalel and Midrashah. People have the questions. I actually never heard of Midrashah, but can you tell us how you get into those schools? You went to Bezalel, correct?
Yes, I went to Bezalel. For the you basically have a committee. You go through two committees. You get a home assignment that you need to create, and you need to come with a portfolio. You go through these committees. It's terrifying. And somehow you get through, and then you get into that crazy ride of 4 years there.
What's the difference between the two schools?
The Midrashah has a lot of emphasis also on education, whereas Bezalel less of that. When I spoke with Efrat, I met her for the first time in person in Chicago. We spent some time together, and she went to the Midrashah, I went to Bezalel. And after half an hour of talking, she was like, "Oh, you don't seem from Bezalel." And I'm like, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, you're not such a snob." So that's kind of sometimes the image. Look, at the end of the day, a lot of the teachers teach in both, but there's a slightly different vibe, which is hard to maybe put the finger on. I do want to say, Tzipi Ronen said about much cheaper prices, and it's true. You can find amazing art also for $500 and $1,000. That's important to say. You don't need to go directly to the caliber that is collected by the Guggenheim and the MoMA, right? Obviously, those are different prices. There are amazing artworks that are very much affordable. You just asked about the ones I showed, so that's what I said, but don't imagine, like, you can find amazing stuff also for $200. It depends what you're looking for, what size, what artist, blah, blah, blah.
Leslie Kessler has a question. She's asked about religious themes, because really what you show, I mean, obviously this is the Shirel curated list. I noticed it's disproportionately female, which is fine. I was
looking at that. I'll just say something about this Shirel's curated list. First of all, that is true, but this list for a month was like in every conversation I had with my friends, both curators and artists. No one argued about it. Like, it's not, it's really beyond like it's beyond my personal. And also the fact that it's female, if you notice the beginning, one moment, I'm just going to do this for a moment so you can see it. You can see here in the beginning, you can see Guy Benel, Adines, Gal, Weinstein, and then suddenly it becomes a lot of females, and Sigalit was a marker of that. And actually, other than Adines and Guy Benel, the major successful Israeli artists internationally right now are women. So it's really like, I'm happy about that, but it's if I was talking now about the years 1970s to 1990, I'd have a hard time doing the same, like proportion, for instance. It would be different, but now that's the case. And there was a question here about religious artists, which I think
either religious artists or religious themes.
Yes. So generally speaking, in Israel and around the world, the art world tends to be secular and liberal. For many years in Israel, religion was out, but it has been changing through a few angles, also having a relatively new 4 years old religious fine art school called Pardes, bringing more artists from the religious world into the scene, as well as a major artist, Shaya Zulai, not related to Elita Zulai, who's a painter who became Orthodox, and his paintings do have religious themes. You know, it's a whole lecture of following the thread of Jewishness within Israeli art, and it's very much connected to questions of identity and Zionism and all of that. So it exists, it's far smaller. The other thing I would say, Yael Bartana for me is a Jewish theme. She touches in her videos, I mean, it starts with Jews. She touches on those questions fully. So yeah, but there's not so much, but there is, Shaya Zulai would be, I think, the major one. And also, are there online sites for the less expensive art? Yes. And I'll say again, it's a labyrinth, and there's art for I'd say any price, and it's about either doing the legwork or finger work these days and finding it. And I can do my best to send you, Ari, an email with a list of options. And it's always a question, again, of your style. Are you also looking to invest? Do you want an artist to like, you know, the value of their works to grow, or do you just want something beautiful in your home? All of these are legitimate, and that will dictate what you're looking for.
So maybe what we can do, you know, for CSP patrons is that I will work with you. We'll identify up and coming artists and people like the Sholkoffs, you know, big donors who like your #1 fan. I mean, Steve is number one. They will support us, and we will send them some kind of really cool art piece. So we'll talk about that offline. People want to know, how come your English is so unique? So let's talk about that for a second. Then I have last 2 questions before I wrap up.
Okay, so I was born in Israel to a mom who was born in Belgium after the war and came to Israel when she was 5 years old. Her mom, as in my grandparents from my mother's side, were German and English. And my mom met my dad in London, who then came to Israel when they married. So I grew up speaking English with an English accent, living in Israel, and then working with Americans for many, many years. You can guess how unhappy my grandma was with my accent deteriorating from my British to the American. And so I grew up bilingual, and my accent is, I'd say, a chameleon. Put me in London for a week, I go fully British. Put me in Memphis, I become Yael. So kind of. Okay,
well, there you go. So when we met you, because you did, in 2017, we did a tour with you in the Florentine, which is one of the best. I mean, we had amazing, you know, people had options, and I chose the Florentine. Which we focused on a bit in one of our programs during this virtual tour when we went to Tel Aviv, with Erez Kaganovich. But tell us a little about when you do, because when we come to Israel, we're definitely going to be working with you on multiple tours. People can have multiple. I mean, Steve Shulkoff, they opted out, just it worked out for them for this year. But if I tell them that you're going to do like 3 or 4 sub-tours, Steve will book his flight right now, is my guess. He'll go down with his mask to the LL desk in LA and book his flight. So when we go with you to like the Israel Museum and Tel Aviv Museum and to galleries, tell us a little bit about what you do at each place that makes it interesting. What's your focus?
Okay. So the places are very, very different, and I love them. For me, it's like taking you guys to a candy shop. I just get like smiley from the thought of them being open and us walking there. In the Israel Museum, there's a Judaica, or it's called Jewish Art and Life wing, and there's an Israeli wing. And there I like doing both, and it allows this opening of conversation about the tension between Jewish and Israeli identity, where the Jewish themes come in, where they don't. Obviously also talking about the Israel Museum itself and its architecture. So that's kind of the focus in the Israel Museum. In the Tel Aviv Art Museum, I also focus on the Israeli Permanent Collection. There, it's built in a kind of linear way from the beginning of the 20th century until today, and it allows us to look at the relationship between the Israeli art scene, the Zionist narrative, and the international happenings from the early 20th century until today. So it's kind of stunning to look at, to both learn the art and to look at the art and enjoy it, but also see how it's a different way of telling history. The galleries are obviously an exploration of what's happening here and now. They migrated to the south of Tel Aviv with the years, and they're tightly connected with gentrification. And in the galleries, we, on the one hand, again, see the up and coming art, what's going on, the different type of galleries between commercial and co-op and different NGOs, but also we explore the relationship to South Tel Aviv, the political, socioeconomical issues that come up there. And usually we also make sure to visit at least one artist in their studio, so you get also the behind the scenes and what it looks like before the art actually comes to play. Oh, and there I also make sure to either start or end on a rooftop, because rooftops in city are the best way to understand where we are. So yeah, so that's the gallery tours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking us on a tour of, you did it. And thank you for fulfilling the request to focus on contemporary Israeli artists. And you took us on a ride in a variety of art. I do think whenever, I'm not a big fan of IKEA, but when I do go, I think I'll start doing some of those things. In fact, I'll take Steve Shulkoff with me. We'll get ourselves banned from IKEA. Maybe I'll take all of CSP and we'll just take over the IKEA here in Costa Mesa. I think that's funny.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Okay, well, we'll videotape it. I'll have Steve. Maybe we'll Steve in a robe in the IKEA. And we'll sell pictures. I mean, not the bad pictures, the good ones. Or we'll give them away to our CSP patrons. So thank you everybody for joining us. What a great tour. You did it. We look forward to having more programs with you over the next future months. Steve insists, so we're gonna do it. We'll focus on different artists and you'll give me great ideas, I assume. We'll work on it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Out of all the artists that you share with us, who would be the one, if you had all the money in the world that you go buy, that would be the first piece that you would buy, not the piece, but the artist. Is there one that's your favorite?
Wow. You know, the one that is my favorite is not in this presentation and is much cheaper, and I love her paintings, but she did it like, that's why sometimes the lists are difficult for me, because the stars, yes, they're amazing, and there's a reason they're in this type of lecture, but there's so much amazing art of people doing, and her name is Talia Ushalmi. Her paintings just like, wow, I would love one of them on my walls. From all the artists that we saw, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, think about it. You'll email me. I'll email everybody the follow-up stuff, and we'll see what you selected. Okay, so everybody have a great day. There's no program this afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Okay.
Thanks for everybody. Have a lovely day.
Bye, Marion. Bye-bye.